All right, could you start off with that story you were just talking about?
I'd be glad to. I have to apologize because I can't remember his name, but he was the mayor during the war. And he came to speak at an assembly, an all-school assembly. And during his speech, he said that when he was in high school, he started a Go to Hell fund. And the reason was that he had a job during high school, during summertime. He and some other youths worked in the mines, iron mines in Minnesota. And they used to go and get the beer for the workers at lunchtime. And like Dutch milk girls, they carried the beer in pails on a stick on their shoulders so you could carry a bunch of buckets. And some of the older boys taught him that you could sip a little beer out of each bucket and nobody would be the wiser. Well, one day he sipped too much beer from the foreman's bucket. The foreman caught him, accused him, he admitted it, and the foreman made him a stoolie for a week. So he spied on all the other workers. And he quit the job because he couldn't stand being a stoolie. And from that time on, he started his Go to Hell fund, where he put enough money in cash in the bank so that if ever he felt that he was in an untenable position, he could tell his employer to go to hell and he could support his family. So there's a good moral there.
That's great.
And as long as we're talking about assemblies, we had Mr. Legg, who was the assistant principal, come in and have an all-boys assembly. And unlike today, I think we taught agriculture, we had a metal shop, we had a wood shop, had a friend that built a boat that he couldn't get out of his basement because it was too big. But anyway, Mr. Legg talked to his boys and he said, I have one request. When you're at the drinking fountain getting a drink and some of the water dribbles out of your mouth onto your trousers and rolls all the way down to the floor without stopping, you know that your trousers are time to be changed. I think that point was well taken. Back in those days, we had one classroom that had screens on the windows and a screen door. That was the agriculture class. He also taught remedial English, and it was Mr. May, but his nickname was Farmer May because he taught agriculture. And as students, we would make sure that when we came into his room, we did it one at a time. That way the door slammed every time. And he would get upset about that. So one day he wrote a beautiful sonnet on the blackboard. And the last line that rhymed was, "Damn it, don't slam it." And so we took him at his word and request, and we went in groups and didn't slam the door anymore.
It's a great story.
Do you guys have student body these days?
Mm-hmm.
Student elections and all that?
Yeah, yeah.
We did. When I was a senior, we were trying to get Paul Jones elected. And one of the things I had heard it was, I don't know, a rumor or something, that if you ran a flag, your flag banner of your person that you wanted to be elected on the flagpole at the stadium, he won, he or she won. So I got up at 5 o'clock, got to school and put up our banner, and he did win. So I don't know how often that is true, even if it's still a tradition at Maine today, but it was kind of fun to be up that early, you know.
We've heard another guy talk about that too. So when your campaign, there was a lot of vigorous student
Oh, it was
elections.
very active back in those days.
So how did that work? Like, so how did you guys compete to win? I've heard like, so you try to put your banner up early, and there was another guy, he got in trouble for that.
Well, we had banners all over the school.
Did you?
Yeah, for all the elective offices. I got caught by Mr. Legg in the gym. You know, most gyms they have the two main baskets and they have side baskets for different gym classes. And I was on one of the side baskets at the ceiling with no ladder, roll of tape in my mouth, the banner, and I had climbed on this pipe all the way out to the center of the gym and was taping the banner as I went back. But I had good upper body strength and there was nothing. I only got frightened when I was on a ladder. We divided the gym with a partition that went across, and I was on a ladder that went up, 45-degree angle up to the ceiling. And they moved the partition. So instead of seeing a solid wall, I was looking down to the floor of the gym. That bothered me. But when the wall was there, it was a piece of cake. And when I was hanging from the pipe, I was looking at the ceiling, and not at the floor, so. it was-
Let's circle back and kind of just
Yeah.
get started a little, or just like trying to get from the beginning.
Okay. What is your name?
My name is Robert Mueller. That's Mueller. My grandfather came from Germany and anglicized the pronunciation. And the only two places in the country where you have to say it's Miller or not say it's Miller, is in Wisconsin and Nebraska. Yes, sir.
Where did you live during the war?
I lived at 317 North Merrill Avenue, which is on the eastern boundary of Park Ridge, right next to Chicago, south of Toohey. Although I guess South Merrill goes to Northwest Highway. And North Merrill is north of Toohey, to Oakton, if it goes through.
Could you tell us about your parents, brothers, or sisters, or anyone living at your house?
I had a sister, mother and a father. My dad was a banker, my mother was a housewife. We were members of St. Luke's Lutheran Church. I was baptized Methodist, which is at the corner of Toohey and Prospect. But my folks didn't want me to walk there because Toohey Avenue was a busy street. And so I could walk safely to the Lutheran Church, which is 2 blocks farther north. So I got confirmed Lutheran the day I'm a Methodist. So, but I want to put it in perspective. We used to walk from Lincoln Junior High School home at times when the buses didn't run. That's just, for the walking through snow or uphill, both ways to go to school. see, I was a Boy Scout. And I should tell you about Boy Scouts. You know, today it's very strict on uh, leadership and two deep leaders and all of this. But because of the war, we were lucky if we had a scoutmaster at a scout meeting. And I only recall taking one camp out where we had an adult leader.
The other ones what you did without an adult leader, or
Yeah, just the kids.
and what was the oldest kid when you did the campouts overnight?
Might have been 12, 13, 14, 15.
Where would you go for your overnight campouts?
Well, if we did it around here, Camp Dan Beard. And that was great. It had cabins, and the cabins had old-fashioned wood-burning stoves. And just camped out, you know.
So all the dads were busy working, or
Yeah, and your scoutmaster, he had a day job, but a lot of them worked in defense plants. And defense plants would say, well, we need another shift, or we need to turn out more torpedoes or something. So you didn't see them, they didn't come home.
so you guys were able to turn out okay, even though you had 13-year-olds being in charge of you for.
Kid Carson was an Indian scout at 13. You know, you give kids a responsibility and they take it. But there was rationing in those days,
How did that affect your campouts?
severely. Well, it was a learning experience. We, to buy ration food, you had to have stamps. And somebody determined the stamp value of all the food. So first you had to go and develop a menu. And theoretically, it was supposed to be well balanced, et cetera, et cetera. And today, scouts, because I've been active in scouting ever since, if the boys do the meals, they get a little off center as far as wholesome, you know.
Yeah.
But because first we had to have a menu, then we had to go to the grocery store and find out what that would cost in stamps. And then we had to go to the War Ration Board to present our menu to a bunch of old men, probably John's age.
Right.
And so we couldn't get by with potato chips, okay? We had to be wholesome. And we would put down margarine, and they would say, no, you're young growing boys, butter. You gotta have butter. And the margarine back in those days, at the beginning of the war, looked like a bar of lard. You know, lard is white, and margarine is white until you put the food coloring in it. And because of the milk industry in Wisconsin, they wouldn't let you sell margarine that looked like butter. So every pound of butter or margarine came with a yellow dye about the size of an M&M. And you'd break that, and then you had to massage it until you got the color uniform, and you got something that looked like the color of butter, and you'd square it up and cool it in the refrigerator, and you'd have something that was like a bar. So the War Ration Board made sure that the scouts got good food.
And so then you boys would go and buy the food from
Go
the
and buy the
grocery-
food, and you'd give, Oh, they give you a checkbook, and, thank you. You had to deposit the check in the bank, and then you got a checkbook. And then you would go, and that's 300 red stamps, so you'd write them out a check for 300 red stamps. So it was all,
There's a lot of responsibility.
A lot
I
of-
think that was great for you.
yeah, it was, looking back on it,
Mhm.
it was great. It was a pain at the time that you had to spend all that time just to go out, have some food, you know, but we learned.
And what would you spend your time doing on a camp out?
Hiking or camping or skating on the Des Plaines River. You know, Camp Dan Beard used to be an old Indian meeting place. So if you're out there, you might find Indian heads. And somewhere along River Road, there used to be a PW camp. And I cardiac rehab with a young man that his father came from Germany, and they had a farm in Hebron, Illinois. And the PWs would be taken out there to work his farm. And his dad spoke German, and of course they spoke German, so it was a good deal. They got good food, they got out of the camp, they worked. They got bus or a truck went back and picked them up at night and took them back. You know where Pescia's is, Forest in Des Plaines and River Road? Their PWs used to walk to Pescia's. No guards, just walk down River Road.
Did you actually meet any of the POWs?
No. No.
Did you ever
The,
see one, or you just knew?
Just knew the stories.
Okay.
A buddy of mine got a job at Kroger's during the war, and he was making, I think, 58 cents an hour. And the kids that became 16, you know where O'Hare Field is, that used to be an aircraft manufacturing plant called Orchard Field. Douglas had a plant there, and they made 4-engine transports, which during the war was known as the C-54s, and commercially they were known as the DC-6. And he was jealous because he thought the guys working at the fence plant were making $1.28 an hour. Actually, they're only making 98 cents an hour, or 40 cents more than he was. But when the war was over, they instantly lost their job, and Darrell kept his. So then he was happy again. But he says he tells his grandchildren that he worked for 58 cents an hour. And they said, "What can you buy with 58 cents?" And he said 10 2-ounce candy bars. They were nickel piece. And big, not these little wimpy things. See, what else can I tell you? Oh, and during the war, I worked as a lifeguard. And it was a good deal because I lived at the country club. I
You
ate all
lived
my
there?
meals at the country
At the
club,
Park Ridge Country Club?
Westmoreland Country Club in Wilmette.
Okay.
And I got room and board, and that helped at home because, and I don't understand the rationing, but when you went to a restaurant, you didn't pay coupons for anything, okay? You just paid them for cash,
So did you live there during the school year, or was this just in the summer?
just in the summertime.
Okay.
So I ate well. I was spoiled. Instead of having milk in my cereal, I had cream. You know, it's all good stuff, but I was about as big as you.
You could use the extra.
Yeah, but I didn't bulk up. I was too active.
Is there anything else you remember about your neighborhood?
You know, we were pretty lucky. We didn't have blackouts and things like that, which they did on both coasts. We had, you know, gasoline rationing, so depending on what your job was, depending on how much gasoline you could get per week or per month. And we were always on the minimum, but I don't know that it ever created any problem for my father. But everybody was a one-car family back in those days. And you didn't have cars that go here and there. Oh, we all rode buses. We all had a pass. We took the city buses. I don't think there was such a thing as a school bus. It was a city bus that did delivery of kids. Our rifle team used to ride the public buses with their rifles. You know, that would be, people would scream today if they saw that. None of them had licenses to carry or a FOID card. They just had a rifle. Where are you going? Going to school. I'm in the rifle team.
So when your parents dropped you off at the country club, they would take the car with them, and you just stay
Yeah.
there all summer.
And hitchhike home. Oh, yeah. We used to hitchhike. And during the war, because of rationing and because the climate was different, you didn't worry about hitchhiking. You didn't worry about pedophiles or anybody. You just did it.
Was that all the it was very common among the students to hitchhike?
It was common among everybody
Really?
that didn't have transportation.
And was it common to pick up hitchhikers?
Yeah. See somebody on the side of the road with them out. If you were lonesome, you wanted conversation or whatever, you know, stop and pick them up and say, well, I'm going to the Plains. And, okay, I'll go that far, and it's, you know, a few miles farther toward McHenry. And, that's how we did it. And we didn't use telephones. You know, that cost money. It was a nickel.
When would you use a telephone, like in the house at all?
Well, an emergency, I guess. I mean, when I went away to college, we never called home. You know, you wrote letters. If you got a phone call, that was pretty serious. Now you just reach in your pocket, take out the phone and call, right? It's amazing. Let's see.
Can you comment on the racial makeup of the student body?
Probably, I don't think we had any Asians, no blacks. We must have had Hispanic, but I can't swear to it, but we had truck farms all around the area. And so their kids had to go somewhere. But I don't remember that as, even being mentioned. We had a Croatian home near us, and when the fighting was in Yugoslavia, there was a lot of discussion about the Croatians and the Muslims and Tito.
So what was the, can you tell us what the Croatian home was?
There was some. We had a teacher, Mrs. She was Kuklovic Damovic, and I forget what she teaches now, but she went to teach at Northwestern. So, and the band director left Maine, I think, during the war and went to Northwestern to become their band director. And the athletic director at Maine, oh, this probably shouldn't be in your thing, but you should be aware of it, was a monotone. And I was in the a cappella, and Mr. Harley was the director of the a cappella. And he saw Mr. Marzullo just standing there during the singing of the anthem or any of the school fight songs with his mouth closed. And he said, "Sam, why aren't you singing?" And Sam said, "I can't carry a note." And Harley said, "Everybody can sing." So Mr. Harley got Mr. Marzullo, and he found out what note he sang by playing it on the piano. Then he increased his range and increased his range until when I graduated in '47, Mr. Marzullo was singing the school songs. So you can do it if somebody's there to give you encouragement.
Was there anything else that you spent your time doing at school? Clubs, activities?
Well, I was on the swimming team. We were Huggy Bears bastards. Excuse me.
What does that mean? Huggy Bears bastards.
Mr. Bear.
Oh.
And he was a gymnast from, I think, University of Indiana. And Germans living in Indiana were part of a Turner Society, which was a tumbling society. And so we didn't have a competitive situation, but we had a lot of guys that could use the flying rings and the side horse and all of that. My experience in the side horse was embarrassing. One day I was vaulting and just running up, grabbing the pommels and splitting your legs out and going over. And the first time, caught my left toe, fell flat on my face. Went back, tried it again, caught my right toe, fell flat on my face. Third time I caught both toes and decided the Lord had a message there. So I stopped vaulting.
Do you recall where you were when you heard that we were at war?
Home on a Sunday, but it was slow to sink in. VJ Day was a better deal. But by being at a country club, there are two things that stand out about the war. One was I registered a guy into this swimming pool because everybody that came through, you put their name down in a book to charge the member, and so you know that people, you didn't lose anything, buddy at the bottom of the pool, you know, check and balance. But I checked the guy in, and it wasn't until much later I noticed that his arm was missing from the middle of the forearm. But he had held it against his side, a natural position, you wouldn't pay any attention to it. And he was an amputee from the war. I met I guess this was, no, I was still 45, the war was still on. And a graduate from Maine of 41 or 42 that had been a Marine. And he had been wounded and almost died, was paralyzed, but got through all of that. And because of his wounds, he was discharged. And after he was discharged, after the war was over, another Marine went into his dad's office in Chicago and took a dog tag and said, I took this off of Dick's body and I wanted you to have it. And he said, well, what do you mean? Dick's home. He's been home for a year plus. And he had been shot so badly, this guy didn't even check it. He knew he was dead. So he improperly removed the dog tag because he knew him and he felt that he was going to get through everything and he was going to give it to his family.
Wow.
And the other thing I remember at the country club was a big dinner dance, no, a wedding, excuse me. It wasn't a dinner dance. And they decided, because there was a lighted pool and it's 10 or 11 at night and I'm asleep and I hear all this commotion, I get up, I go out, get dressed, and they're throwing officer of the Navy into the pool, and he's a little high, climbs up to the high board and jumps into the pool, having fun. And I could have no control. I was a 15-year-old kid trying to say, would you please? And they were beyond control. But they sobered up when somebody picked up a bridesmaid in all of her flowing dress. She must have 14 petticoats on. And they were going to throw it. She would have sunk like a rock. You know. But they decided that was improper behavior, so everything quieted down. I forget who mentioned, did you mention Miss Parolini?
Yes.
This probably shouldn't be part of your report either, but I'll tell you the story because it's a good story. Teachers back in those days had a lot of power. And you as students didn't. If you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home. Because there's no such thing as students' rights. You were wrong to begin with. And this young man owed Miss Parolini some writing. And we were on line to graduate.
I mean,
And
in
she-
line at the day of graduation?
She plucked him out of the line and said, "No, you owe me a paper. You cannot graduate." And he did not graduate. And so 30 years later, we heard this story and we made him a cap so that he could have a tassel that he could throw to the other side and feel that he had been part of the ceremony. She was tough. But everybody that had her for English could still diagram a sentence today. I mean, they learned English from Miss Perlin. Very good. Any other?
Well, I guess about school. Was there anything that outside of school you spent your time with, like jobs during the school year or dating, friends?
I didn't date much. Jobs, I worked, summertime, I worked for 4 years at the country club. And the wintertime, I worked, I guess for the Railroad Express Agency at the Northwestern train station. If you take the Northwestern downtown, if you're walking between the tracks, you'll see elevators every once in a while. Those go down to a lower level where all the trucks move. And any mail that comes in gets taken off the train and we sort it down underground. And I took the first train out of Park Ridge during, say, Christmas vacation or on Saturdays. And then came back after an 8-hour day. And that was fun because you'd run and meet trains. And back in those days, they didn't have big things like Palatine where there's a rail or a mail distribution center. There were people riding the railroad all night long sorting mail. Because they'd hang the bags by the railroad tracks, and the train would come by and snap the bag off the holder. And I'd sort it, because they knew where the train was going, and he'd sort, and by the time the mail got to New York, it was sorted for all the little towns.
So after the war began, did anything change in your family?
No, my father was too old to be drafted. I had an uncle that was drafted just before his 40th birthday, which I think was the limit
Wow.
of being drafted. And he was a short man and became a ball turret gunner.
Really?
And he had a brother who was in the New York National Guard in 1939, so he went into the service. Never saw a day of action in his life. Closest he got to combat was shipped to Hawaii, and then he was shipped back to the States for more training, and he kept getting trained and trained and trained and trained and trained. And his brother had, I think, 28 missions over Germany. got shot down by a German jet and captured by German farmers in a PW for 30 days and released by Patton's army.
Wow.
So you got one brother with no stories and another brother with all the war stories. So that's just the luck of the draw, you know.
Did any of your friends get drafted or people at school?
No, not that I'm, but I have a friend that is 90 from Montana, and he enlisted in the Marine Corps right after Pearl Harbor and was shipped to Australia immediately after basic training. And we didn't know is that they put him on a senior moment, guys, a tourist ship, you know, one ship loaded with a division of Marines, no escort, no nothing, and there's a war on. And you go from San Diego to Australia. And we made it.
Wow.
So, but some of my classmates enlisted at Glenview Naval Air Station. I tried to do that, but my eyesight was 2300. And the enlisted man said, walk to that wall until you can read the eye chart. Well, I kept walking until I could read the eye chart, and he said, sorry, you fail. And I said, what do you mean I fail? I read it. He says, yeah, but you're too close. You see that pipe on the floor? I said, yeah. He said, you gotta read it from there. So I backed up and I couldn't read it. Oh, VJ Day, I guess I should tell you that. When that happened, closed the pool down and walked a mile, I think, to a bus station in Wilmette. And got to the L, took the L downtown, and Chicago was people, wall to wall. I mean, and the funny thing was that I'm all by myself, and who do I run into but a Maine Township classmate, football player, and we're talking and hugging girls and kissing girls and saying hooray, and everybody's having fun. And something hit us from behind, and we thought somebody was looking for a fight. And we turned around and there was nobody there. And we looked down and there was a guy flat on his face on the pavement. So we picked him up and tried to move through the crowd. And we said, excuse me, we got a sick man here, would you let us through? And people turned and looked at us and went about their business. And we started swearing. And it was absolutely amazing. Swearing was not common in the 50s, 40s, as it is today. It was like the Red Sea. Just, you could have driven a truck through the hole we made in the crowd. Because we got through their euphoria that there was something serious there. and we took him to the first aid station, which was in the first floor at the entrance of the Marshall Field and Company.
And he was okay.
Don't know. Just dropped him off, and just doing their job, you know. But civilians in the Midwest really didn't know that there was a war on. We had food, we had rationing, it was a pain in the butt. And if you didn't have gasoline, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. But life went on, and everybody's family was involved in some way. You had somebody that was in the service. There was a draft, so no family escaped it. If you were a certain age, everybody had a number, and they kept pulling numbers out of the hat, and it was your turn to go. Today it's 1% of the family, so that you don't know that there's a war on anywhere if you didn't read the papers. And we would go to the movies, and that's where you would see what was going on in the RKO newsreel.
Where did you go to the movies?
Pickwick, and the favorite seat was 333. Third aisle. Third row down, third seat. And I remember the only significant thing there was that a buddy sitting at the aisle, and they got lights on the edge of the seat, the aisle seat, so you can see your way forward. He was screwing around during Dr. Cyclops with the bulb, and he shocked himself during a very emotional scene on the screen, and he screamed when the 110 hit his fingers, and I mean the whole theater went up. But same guy. We're walking back, and there was a guy stopped at the stoplight across the crosswalk. So he opened the rear door of the car, walked into the car, opened the other rear door of the car, and we all followed him like sheep right through this guy's car. And then we left the doors open. Our favorite Halloween trick was the rope trick. Do you guys even know what the rope trick might be? Okay. You stand under a street light as a group of people. Then one part of the group you split in half, and they walk backwards across the street, and it looks like you're paying out something, okay? And then when a car's coming, you do this. And when the car gets close to you, you all lean back like you're pulling a rope, and the car stops. And we did that one night and stopped the squad car. And where's the rope? Where's the rope, you guys? No rope? What do you mean there's no rope? Well, they didn't like that, and the word got around, so they were ridiculed by their fellow officers. So they came looking for us and put us in the Park Ridge jail for a couple of hours. Lost the key, guys. I'm sorry. Gee whiz. Oh, the other thing we had back in the, I just thought about it, we had a youth center in Park Ridge back in those
Where was this at?
days. By Central School, is Central School still there?
The Central School, isn't that where the library?
Yeah, Central School's now the Park Ridge Library,
Yeah, the library used to be,
across the street at wherever that hairstyle place in Allstate
um,
building is.
anyway, it was a building, a home. And that was a very active place.
What kinds of things did you, was popular to do there?
Just meet. I wasn't a dancer, so, but it was just a great hangout, and we used to go there and do things. But I can't tell you what. But it was friendly, threatening environment. We had fun.
Are there any other buildings that you remember in Park Ridge? Like, do you
Oh, I
remember?
loved the library. I was a book rat. And I loved the smell of musty books. And in 1946, I'm rambling here, Bo O'Brien, a junior, won the straight track meet for Maine. One person. I think he won 2 races. And every other race was won by a different school. But they only won 1 race. And so Bowen, being fast in 2 races and winning 2 races, had more points than the other schools.
Do you remember the assemblies that the high school would have when a fellow student was killed in action?
No.
Okay. Some people have, some people haven't. So that's okay.
The only other assembly I remember was we had a Royal Canadian Mounted Policeman lecture, or give us a talk. Oh, I got another one for you too. And he mentioned chasing desperados in the wintertime. And one of the students during question and answer period said, "Is chasing these guys in the wintertime, how in the heck do you bathe up there in Canada?" And he said, "You didn't." And the student said, "Didn't you smell?" And he said, "Yeah, but only for the first week." I mean, he got used to it. We had another lecturer that worked for the White House, and his job was to summarize military intelligence reports for the president, which he did for, I guess, the entire war. And afterwards, publishing houses said, "You got to have a story. You were the one person that probably had more knowledge of what was going on in all the theaters as anybody." And he said, "My own problem is I spent 4 years summarizing. I can't expand anymore. My mind is just changed." and you guys were using a tape camera before. Before tape, there was wire recorders. The first recording device recorded on stainless steel wire, about the size of ordinary sewing thread. And they went from that then to the ribbon. But the first machines were very small. And so I think I'm running out of stuff.
Do you remember the assembly that the school had when they took all the kids down to the Douglas aircraft area and showed the
Just,
plane?
just there. Mob scene. You're just part of the whole thing. But
Mhm.
And it's just, if it's supposed to happen, you're part of it. And it's not that significant. That day it doesn't appear to be significant anyway.
Just had a question about like rationing, and do you remember how much did it affect like your mom and what you ate and everything like that? Do you remember? Was there anything in particular?
I'm sure it affected my mother. But, women who cook, learn to cook, and they can substitute, and they do quite well in adding bread to meatloaf or whatever. And you don't know, and I was a growing boy in those days, but I don't recall being
Deprived or anything?
deprived, yeah.
Did you guys have a victory garden?
Oh, yeah. Most people had victory gardens,
Mm-hmm.
fresh vegetables. Milk was in glass bottles back in those days. So mother could ration the milk by looking at the milk in the bottle and knowing how much milk she needed tomorrow for whatever she planned to do or serve before she went shopping. When milk went into paper cartons, mother couldn't see how much milk was in the carton. So if Alan asked for, Mom, can I have a glass of milk? Mother would say, sure. And Alan would empty the carton. So another carton had to be used to fill up the rest of the glass. And you didn't have that when you had glass bottles. It was
Where'd you guys go grocery shopping?
Downtown,
In Chicago?
no,
In Park Ridge?
Park Ridge. On the north corner of Prospect and Toohey. On the east side of the street, there was a National. I think there was a Kroger down by the Pickwick. There's a great ice cream store down by the Pickwick whose ice cream was so good, Board and Milk bought out the
Was
formula.
that Robinson's or like? Because I remember there was a soda fountain.
Don't remember.
Oh.
And there was a drugstore at the corner of Toohey and Prospect that had a good counter, with a soda jerker all that, that was good. We had a great bakery on Tui Avenue. On the street that goes out from Tui to Lincoln School. There was a bakery there, and I can't think of the name of it, but, oh, great coffee cakes.
Getting me hungry.
And there was a Chinese restaurant on the second floor down by the railroad tracks, just up on Prospect. And he had the greatest French fries. We used to go there and drink tea, and because he was a Chinese place, we didn't think we could get coffee, and they had his French fries, because they were delicious. Might have been the salt, but gee, they were good.
Do you remember anything about VE Day?
Yeah, it was fun being downtown.
The Europe Day, Victory in
Oh,
Europe.
Victory in Europe? No,
It wasn't a big deal.
no, there was still a war on. Everybody
Right.
was going overseas. I mean, going to Japan.
Right.
Do I have your email address?
I don't think so.
Give it to me and I will send you a copy of the invasion plans for Japan.
Oh, that'd be great.
And it describes all of the stuff that was coming from Europe for the invasion of Japan,
Yeah.
because it was only half over. And nobody expected it to be over so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a long battle.
Do you remember selling any bonds for the airplane benefit?
No, just doing it and buying, everything was priced so that you could buy a 10-cent stamp, a 25-cent stamp, and you put them in books. And when you got 1875, you could buy a war bond, which when it matured was $25. And
Can you describe that again? I hadn't heard that before.
the war stamps, yeah, you could buy individual, you got 10 cents, you could buy a 10-cent stamp or a quarter stamp, might have even a dollar stamp, and you could paste them in your book. A page might be worth $1 if you put 10-cent stamps on it. And so you could go through a book and that way, and when you got 1875, that was the value of a $25 war bond, redemption value. And you get a bond, and you get your name on it, and the whole bit, it was, that's yours.
So you mentioned that your dad was a banker. Where was he a banker, and did you take your books to your dad's bank?
Probably, he took him. He worked downtown, and he worked at the first bank that had a drive-in, the Exchange National Bank at 130 South LaSalle. They are part of the Bank of America today. But when he started banking, he was a teller at the West Side Trust and Savings Bank. at Halsted and 12th Street, which is right down at Maxwell Street. And when the Depression came, their bank was solvent because the immigrants were here to better themselves. So they saved money like mad to buy apartment buildings so that they could have income coming in. And that was their retirement. You own an apartment building, you have a place to live, you rent apartments out, and the money comes in and pays your taxes and all that, so it's a good deal. So the West Side Trust and Savings Bank, when the First National Bank of Chicago had to run on their bank, and ran out of cash, my dad's bank said, "We got cash, we'll loan it to you." And did. And the First National got through the run, so they didn't close. And when the run hit my dad's bank, they went to the First National and said, "Help." And the First National said, "What'd you say? Can't hear you."
Wow.
So my dad's bank went bankrupt and he was out of a job.
Do you remember anything about life right after graduation?
College. I had a roommate, said it was interesting going to school after the war was over because a lot of the students were 30 years old. And prior to the war and probably during the war, if kids were still going to school, they hazed. A lot of hazing was going on back in those days. So if you're a freshman, you're lower than a snake, so we can tease you and make you do things so that you can do it to the next freshman class. And the GIs didn't go for any of that. And so hazing disappeared very rapidly. But I had a roommate that was a radio operator, naval transports in World War II. And he said, well, in 5 years there'll be another war. And the Korean War started in 1950, 5 years. And that was interesting. Prior to the Korean War, I think we had 1 or 2 or maybe 5 overseas bases with military attached. And after the Korean War, we had 500. It's been the same ever since.
Do you have any advice for teenagers today?
Study, study, study. But follow your heart. But it starts with studying. And you don't know what you're going to learn. I discovered at the age of 50, I guess, that I could draw. Now, I scribbled a lot, but I can copy. I retired in 92. At 62, I 2 years later, I volunteered at the Botanic Garden in Glencoe. And we wanted to find out how healthy our oak woodlands were. And one of the ways of doing that is to study the mushrooms in the area, because mushrooms are an indicator of the quality of an oak woodlands. And so we spent 2 years digging up mushrooms in specific plots of ground that were randomly chosen. And then I and two ladies identified mushrooms, and we didn't know a darn thing about mushrooms until we started to identify them. And I sketched most of the mushrooms we discovered. And that was a skill I didn't know I had, but I started doing it, so botanical sketches, you know. So you don't hesitate reaching for a dream. Do you want to be an architect? The only thing I can tell you, or suggestion I can give you, is that when you're doing architectural drawings, your teacher loved real sharp, straight angles. Okay? That's good for drawing a building. But if you're designing pieces of equipment, there's going to be any stress on the equipment. You don't want sharp angles. You want curves to reduce the stress. Otherwise, if you ever look at a sickle, it's got a big curve by the handle. And the reason is if it was at a right angle, every time you'd get one blow out of it, and it would break right there at the sharp angle, because it concentrates all the stresses. You taken chemistry at all?
Yeah.
Do you ever cut glass rods,
No.
tubes? You probably can't do it today because of the OSHA or something, but we used to take a triangular file and you scratch it. Then you can just put a little stress on the scratch, you know, and you get a sharp crack right across the glass because of the stress concentration.
Well, that's all I have on the sheet.
Okay. You have any questions?
No.
Okay. Great.
Does Scribe have anything?
Yes, I'm well pleased. I am curious, though, what did you go on to do?
I became